don't know right and left, they don't know what a circle is. You know, there's all these things that are a little bit more abstract. This song is usually very, very successful, to the point that some students have a little OCD over it. And I have a student that's in grade 6 who, when he sees me, starts to say it, and I really have to say I want his music now to be more age appropriate, so that I'm trying to introduce him to like some hip hop movement numbers, which I have to, so that they can start doing, so that, they just don't look so elementary based. So you can see all the different things that are happening. They're all sitting, they're all calm. The music had repetitive pattern. They once in a while get a student, and it's very rare that it's just too loud or too much. And if they need to take a little break, that's fine, because they usually come back, because it's engaging enough. But they're learning something, they're learning their body parts. A lot of them don't know at all their body parts, or they don't know that this is a nose. They might know, like if they saw it, that they imitate, we start to put a word with it, and and then a gesture, and so they're imitating me. And the goal is for them to be able to, in other situations, be able to identify their body and their body parts and where they are in space.
And it's just movement is, as we talked about, very regulating in and of itself. They did a study, which it's interesting. You guys were all kind of, from what I could see, smiling. And really we won't get into that, but if the physical act of smiling has been shown to alleviate mild depression in people. If you get up, you smile, you make yourself smile in the mirror for a couple minutes every day, it impacts the level of reported depression. So when we're doing these things with our bodies, we are regulating ourselves, our emotions. And this is, you guys all have to practice this one. This pose, they actually had kids stand up. So you learned about it. So what is the effect of the power pose?
Amy tried it for 2 minutes.
It was a TED Talk.
Gives you the confidence.
Wow.
Testosterone.
I can add that. So do you have any questions about that? So this was kind of my portion. I just thought that, I think you learn better by doing. I am a phys ed teacher. And but now I was going to share the floor with Dr. Curley about communication. But you do have to ask questions, or she's not going to be able to come down at all from being a yeah.
So you guys tell me, do you guys feel comfortable on the floor, or do you want to go back behind your tables?
Either
Let's stay where you are, right? It's kind
They
of
move at some
nice.
point
It's nice to sit and be in a different position every once in a while. So you guys tell me, you've had people come and talk to you. I'm trying to think of what question I want to ask, because I want to really hear your thoughts. So I'm trying to think about how best to, of all the things you've learned so far, what was the thing that was most unexpected?
Well, at least for me, I just didn't have a lot of prior knowledge, so I wasn't expecting anything, so nothing could be unexpected.
Yeah.
It was just all of it was a learning experience.
Yeah.
You probably don't know this, our reading assignment for this class was Tempo Grandin's book, The Trust of Brain.
I was looking at it.
Yeah, so that's about where we are.
All right, so,
That's what we
yeah, that's perfect.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I've past experience with folk on the spectrum, or on the spectrum, and I guess what was so surprising to me is, I had that one example, almost defined autism for me, and learning about the entire spectrum and an example across the spectrum I thought was very, very, very cool in the sense that it's not just one set of characters. It's not, it really does.
Right, that's such a great point, because that's a great point. I think that surprises me all the time. Of like, oh, I thought I kind of got this, and wait a minute, this is new. And so that's a great example. What else did you guys, has been unexpected?
Well, we also talked a lot about whether or not it was necessary to find a cure, and I think talking
That's
about,
an interesting.
thinking about whether or not it is necessary to find a cure, and then why are we even normal and they're not normal? Why should they be like us and stuff like that.
That's a great
So what are your
things to
thoughts
talk
on that?
about.
I'm just curious.
I mean, I think that I don't know, we talked a lot about it, but I think that if you're on the higher end of the spectrum and I think it just depends on the happiness of the person, you know, and I mean, if we can prevent things, like if there's something during pregnancy where you can tell that, and there's something that you can do to work to fix it, I think yes, maybe, because, I mean, it sometimes can be hard for the family living with the child if the child's really not functioning, and hard for the child, but if a person is okay with it, then why do we need to heal this person? I think we can do everything in our power to make it easier for this person to live, but I don't necessarily think that there has to be a specific kind of person that we all have to be, you know?
Right, do you think, oh, go ahead.
It's very much like the ethical debate about amniocentesis.
Right.
Why are we doing it? Are we doing it so we can weed out the weaklings, quote unquote, Pink Floyd quote? Why do we need to know the fate of a child before he's born? Is one question.
Right, so that is, I mean, I do think that's a really interesting, it kind of does define who, that's a great question to think about.
Something to address at some point, I think, before we leave today is the different models. So we saw the Groden Center last week in this wonderful environment. And then there's the public system. And we talked quite a bit about that before you came. And I don't know, I don't want to redirect the thing, but I think this is a great forum for you all to ask questions of how it's dealt with in the public system, you know, and if you have questions for Jill and Sue now, because it's...
Yeah, I'm just going to send in a little anecdote. What when we drove up here, because it's, you know, like a 40-minute drive, I was like venting a little bit, because what I found is that there were people today that were getting mad at two of my students for being autistic, and I thought, what? Like, that's, I went in and I thought, and they were adults. The kids, I have to say, the other students are fine. You know, there's absolutely no issues with them. They'll just say, oh, that's how so-and-so is. Oh, well. You know, I mean,
that's
you know,
not
they might
always the
want
case,
to-
Jill. Sometimes.
Not always. I mean, you know, there's the sharing issue, and, you know, and they might, you know, not like who was being rubbed. You know, they might not want to be rubbed. You know, there are those cases, but in general, and especially once they get to high school, I teach an inclusion model class, so I have students that volunteer peers at the high school level, and they embrace it. I mean, they love to be with, and there's no other word. I mean, I've read their essays at the end of the semester, and one girl said, I only come to school because he smiles at me, and I thought, oh my gosh, you know, like, this is that. But
So who's benefiting, which goes right back to your question.
yeah, who's benefiting?
Right?
And but what I was finding today in particular was just really challenging, because we should be embracing everybody, and once in a while we get these adults that just they're like mad at them for being.
They are.
You know, and I couldn't go out to teach the adult. I mean, you know, and just say, what are you doing? And it wasn't the right.
Were they
oh, this
were
is
they
what I-
teachers in the class, the adults?
They're typically instructional aides and one teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that against Title VI?
It's against a million things. I mean, it was just, you know, besides my own ethical philosophy in the world of acceptance, being an adaptive PE teacher. But anyway, typically, you know, so a typical day for somebody, I mean, maybe that would help. I know a lot of you had hands up, but they typically will have some sort of schedule, whether it's electronic, visual, written, that's very predictable. And so they would start probably by going, if they were middle school, high school, going to their locker. Some of them might need help each time along that step. And then the school, it's our job to provide that support if they need it, if it's another person, if it's visuals or whatever support to get that. And depending on their cognitive level, sometimes they're in classes with the typically developing, and sometimes they're in classes with students that have more of a self-contained model.
Do you guys know what a more self-contained model is? So have you heard that word? Okay, some people have. So you know the schools are responsible for providing a range of support services to kids. And that, like, so when you talk about sometimes, like someplace like Groden Center, you're talking about a specialty kind of service. So schools are kind of responsible, if you talked about all the different kids, that it surprises you. Well, schools have all the different kids,
Yeah.
so we have to provide, and Jill's really speaking to that, so we have kids that maybe don't have, they might have a visual schedule they follow, they might come see me to work on some regulation strategies, and really, maybe nobody else knows they have, are on the spectrum. You know, it's just not like you're not gonna go, ooh, spectrum person, you know, it's not how it is, right? And it shouldn't be that way. And then there are kids that really struggle with how to function in the world, you know, and they need a lot more support. So schools will do a lot more, so they might be in a smaller classroom, which is, we usually consider it a self-contained classroom, a classroom that has generally, and we don't always use that word anymore, but generally it's kids that all have pretty significant needs. And there is probably every, I know, right, goodbye, we're all tired now. We have every kid from that very intense kind of classroom where there's probably a lot of adults, a lot of visual support. The task demands are probably really modified to kids that you probably wouldn't even know they're in spectrum. And we have all those kids, and we have to figure out what level of support each of them needs. So that, I think, is probably the big difference from a public school versus kind of a specialty provider. Although schools do sometimes send kids to specialty providers. I mean, that is one of the things we consider part of what we would, if we can't meet a child's needs in the school, we will go to a specialty provider. And then you have to pick what specialty provider is gonna be able to, you know, meet that child's needs. So anyway, but you'll keep
Yeah.
going with like a
Okay,
typical
so,
day, sorry.
So in the typical, so they go to their locker and then they probably go to, I'm thinking middle school, kind of middle age, they probably go to a homeroom where, depending on their level of need, if it's somebody who's, let's say, cognitively fine in terms of testing, so they're able to take the statewide testing, which is, you know, part of the public school responsibility, they probably have a checklist of things that they might have right on their desk, or maybe not. Maybe they have that piece down and they don't have to share it. Depending on their level of academic need, there might be somebody who reads aloud to them versus having them read everything. Like if reading is a struggle, they might, like